This is Grafted Together with ACSI Chief Ministry Officer Jerry Nelson.
Teaching, the most rewarding profession, is the one Jesus chose to transform the world. In America, teachers were once revered and respected, but, that's not the case much anymore. The demands of teaching in modern America are immense, yet the calling still remains. If we're called by God, obedience is required. God will provide for our needs, but we do have a responsibility to be prepared, to be good stewards of the calling that we've received. James does warn us that not many of us should be teachers because we'd face stricter judgment. A typical week for a modern day Christian school educator includes lesson planning, homework, parent meetings, teacher certification, more parent meetings, aftercare duties, cafeteria duties, and of course, there's their home life. And did I mention parents, and more parents? But I can't tell you the transformation I've received in my life because of the Christian teachers. So the question that I have for us today is, how do we be good stewards? How do we carry on this legacy that our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, left for us, the Rabbi? Hi, my name is Jerry Nelson, and this is Grafted Together. I want to remind you that spiritual formation matters. It is what makes Christian education. And if you're not part of the growing spiritual formation network, you're definitely missing out. We had the privilege of having Dr. Annie Gallagher kick off our training on the spiritual formation journey map, leading us to understanding expected student outcomes. So coming up on November 18th, we will have Dr. Tim Van Solen from the Center for the Advancement of Christian Education at Dordt University, who will walk us through the next phase of the spiritual formation journey map in the area of assessments. So to register for the Spiritual Formation Network meeting, you can sign up at acsi.org/convene. And that is acsi.org/convene, and look for Spiritual Formation Networks. Get registered today to connect with spiritual formation ambassadors, literally from around the world, and of course, receive regular updates on upcoming training and networking opportunities. Again, that's acsi.org/convene. So joining me today to talk about this whole idea of Christian educator and biblical stewardship is Mark Senseman. Mark serves in the position of Director of Business Development. He develops, communicates, executes, and sustains corporate strategic initiatives for Servant Solutions. He is a 1988 graduate of Anderson University with a BS in Business Management. And throughout his career, Mark has made it his goal to use his gifts and talents to further the kingdom. He feels called to serve the churches and faith-based organizations with resources that bring about transformational impact to the lives of those far from God. Mark and his wife, Pat, reside in Indianapolis, Indiana, and have been married for 29 years, almost 30. They enjoy travel, good food, new recipes shared with family and friends, and spending time with their two adult children, Blake and Paige. And of course, I just learned that he is expecting a new addition to the family. Mark, welcome to the podcast.
Jerry, it's great to be here. And as you just said, around the house today, we are full of excitement and anticipation for the birth of our first grandchild. Our son and his wife have been married a little over 3 years. And so we're excited for them, but we're also continuing to pray that the Lord will bring about a healthy baby boy. And Pat and I could not be happier to enter this new season of life. So thanks for having me on the podcast today. I've been really looking forward to this for the last couple weeks. You and I have had a couple of conversations leading up to this, and I have been blessed by how we have been able to, interact and share what the Lord's called us to in this season of ministry. And so I'm really looking forward to sharing a little bit more and kind of giving some of the folks there some of the sneak peek or behind the scenes of what kind of our conversations have been like, centered around this idea of the Christian educator, teaching from a biblical worldview, being responsible to steward the resources, the time, talents, and treasure that they've been given in a way that not only honors God, but furthers the kingdom. So thanks again for having me.
Yeah, amen. And, as we were sharing, one of the initiatives that we have, one of our strategic initiatives for Vision 2030 is recognizing that the teacher and leader pipeline is just really drying up, excuse me. But it still remains this divine calling, and it's a special calling. And I'm sure everyone can remember that teacher who had a negative impact on them, and they can remember that teacher who had a positive impact, on their lives. And just really a great opportunity here. But hey, Mark, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, my wife and I have been married almost 30 years now. We got two adult age kids. I graduated from Anderson University, and I come from a ministry family. My dad was a pastor. My sister is in located ministry, but I did not receive that calling. And you talked about calling, and I think it's so interesting how the Lord equips us for what He wants us to do, our role that we want to play in the kingdom. But I really was. I guess, kind of disappointed, frustrated, and really spent a long time trying to understand why I did not receive that same calling. Because it would make sense. Hey, your dad's a pastor. Your dad's dad was a pastor. Why did I not get that? Why did that pass over to me and to my sister? And so I spent a number of years, kind of questioning and wondering, what is my role? Why am I not a pastor at a church, or why am I not on a church staff?
Mhm.
And the Lord got a hold of my heart through the Holy Spirit and said, I'm equipping you, and I've given you the talents and the skills and the ability not to lead, but to serve. And
Mm.
when I figured out what that was, and I figured out how to do that, it set me on a completely different trajectory than what I thought I was supposed to do. And so, what my opportunities now is to be able to equip and encourage, but also to serve those that are on the front lines, pastors, teachers, leaders in higher education, to be able to help them to, through the lens of biblical stewardship, how can I be a good steward of that time, talent, and treasure, but not only that, the resources. And it's been a great journey thus far, and I really enjoy getting a chance to serve. We do live in Indianapolis, just on the west side, and just love what I get to do to help the kingdom grow and expand.
I really appreciate what you said. A colleague and I at ACSI, we've been talking about this whole idea of vocation and what that means and calling. And just we both recognize that God hasn't called everyone to be, a pastor in a church, and it's no less a sacred calling if God calls you, to be a plumber or carpenter for His glory. If that's how God has equipped you, He's sent you to that particular area. What I really appreciated about our conversations is that you definitely have a strong sense that this is what God has called me to do. And I get the sense that you are operating fully in that. And as you said, your desire is to serve. And so you've drawn some comfort and peace in the fact what God has called you. And I can think about that for our teachers. Our teachers, many times they may look at other professions that are making a whole lot more money, or even other teachers who are in public school systems,
Mhm.
and they may say, well, man, I could be making more money, but but I would say to the Christian educators, hey, has God called you to be in this particular place? So, but as I said in the intro, our Christian educators, they a lot of times they're dealing with a whole lot more challenges, a whole lot more expectations. They have the pressure of even a lower pay scale. A lot
Mhm.
of times, maybe the benefits aren't as great at that particular Christian school. But in our conversations, we said, well, if that's what God has called you to do as a Christian educator, and you know what you're getting into, there's still that responsibility to answer that call faithfully, but also to prepare yourself for walking in that. So I wanted to kind of center our conversation just first off, on this whole concept of biblical stewardship, can you define for our listeners what is biblical stewardship?
Yeah, biblical stewardship, I think, is viewing yourselves not as a vessel or a reservoir, but rather a conduit,
Mm,
where the Lord wants to use you to pass through what He has for you, and then you be able to then share that with other people. And I think that all too often we want to, out of selfish ambition, out of pride, out of greed, we want to view those as, no, that's mine. And when we understand that the Lord owns it all and He's just called us to be caretakers and stewards of that. I mean, the Bible in the New Testament talks a lot about this idea of being a good steward. And we see the parable of the talents. We see this where somebody was given an amount and somebody else was given a different amount, but they were all called to steward that resource well.
mhm,
And just a lot of examples. But when I see in my own personal life, and I'm kind of thinking about the lens of through a Christian educator, it has to start with an understanding that the Lord owns it all, and that we are just caretakers to be able to help manage that. And it's for His glory, for His honor, and also to bless other people. And I think when we get that right, it frees us up to be able to not feel that weight and pressure necessarily, realizing the Lord's just calling us to be faithful. He's given us an amount, and that's the amount that He's given us, that we see that as a blessing. And we just have to just steward that well, and realize that we want to bring honor and glory to God. You talked about mission a little bit and the calling that's there. It's also preparing for your ministry, for your vocation, also by taking good care of yourself.
mm.
And we have to realize that there's some other things that we have along with that mission. I made just a couple notes here. Continuing to strive for excellence in everything, loving your students, uh, teaching for the
Mm,
heart, not just for the right behavior.
mm,
We're in a profession, teachers, where you are bringing transformational life change through a biblical worldview, helping them understand that the Lord is in charge of it all. He calls us to be good stewards, and that also means preparing ourselves well each and every day. So I kind of look at it through the lens of the Lord owns it all. We're to be good stewards. And so, what does that mean? In everything we do and everything we say and how we conduct ourselves, including the area of our finances, we want to bring honor and glory to Him. He's given these to be able to care for us, these blessings, but also to be able to share those with others.
Yeah, I'm even channeling my own experience when I started out in Christian education, because this is the only profession that I've been in, outside of my, I would call them my side hustles, things that make a little extra money,
Sure.
on the side. But this is the only profession I've known, and I remember coming into I remember what I made, and I look back at what I was making as a Christian educator. It's like no one could survive on that, here in America during this time. And I know for Christian educators, it's that combination of, man, I feel like I'm having a hard time making ends meet. Demands are continue to put on me. I'm between a rock and a hard place. How does a Christian educator, have that right focus? And I really love what you said about being a conduit. What's the right mindset that, and again, I'm thinking about new Christian educators coming in, veterans who have been there, let's say 10, 15 years, and even those individuals who are kind of on their last leg. What is the right mindset, or what does a person who has the right attitude towards, biblical stewardship in this area, what are they thinking about? What are they
Yeah.
doing?
It's interesting that you said, what are they thinking about? Because I think the Bible calls us not to be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. So, what does that mean in this area? I think what it means for a younger teacher that's just starting out, maybe it's somebody that's been in the classroom maybe 2 to 5 years. We talk a lot about helping our members try to determine and figure out what is your yes. What
Mm,
is the thing that you prioritize? What are your goals? What are your objectives? What do you feel like is important to you? And you have that crystal clear. If you're married, there has to be the same, like-minded goals with your spouse. But once you do that, Jerry, it's very freeing to be able to see an opportunity and realize it doesn't fit with my goals. It doesn't fit with what we
mm,
want to do. And so
mm,
instead of being challenged to maybe look at what other people have or what they're doing or how they're doing things, you figure out what your yes is. And when you do that, it's very freeing because you can easily spot the things that don't fit there. That's not a goal of mine. That's not what I want to accomplish. And it's very freeing that way. For those that have been kind of already halfway through the journey, you've got that half marathon, you're at that mile 13. You probably are looking back and you're realizing, man, if I just wouldn't have made those mistakes, well, I don't think that the Lord, through His grace and through His mercy, continues to look at us through the lens of the sins that we've committed or the things that we've blown in the past. But what He's calling us to is, okay, well, what are you going to do now?
mm,
And I think for those people, particularly in the area of finances, as you think about retirement, debt, make sure that you have a plan that is in place and you're constantly monitoring that. I don't mean dwelling on it every day because that's going to create anxiety, but I do think that we when we fail to plan, we're planning to fail.
mm,
And so again, I think having a blueprint, a roadmap to be able to get back on the journey, realizing that hey, this is not a sprint, this is a marathon. And for that opportunity, then you have to be able to make some course corrections. And then for those that are kind of nearing the end of that journey, let's look back and let's celebrate what the Lord has done. I love that biblical example of the footprints. It's kind of a cheesy thing, but in my grandma's house, I remember there being something on the wall, and it was this idea of, hey, these were two sets of footprints, and all of a
mm,
sudden, then there's only one set, and we say, Lord, where were you when this happened? And it's that idea of, no, I was carrying you. The
yeah,
Lord is always with us. He's not going to do anything or cause anything that's not going to be for our benefit, for his honor and his glory. And so I think that what we hope is that um, you can look back and you can see the Lord's provision. You can see the Lord being faithful, and then sharing those blessings with your family, sharing those blessings with others, and looking back and reflecting just how the Lord has been faithful. When we bring all of the pieces to Him, He puts those together in such a way that we could not do that ourselves. I
mm,
always love this example of broken glass. That when something breaks, then we almost think that no, we should just throw it out. But I think when we
mm,
bring that brokenness to the Lord, He's able to put that together in such a way that allows our lives to be an example of what the Lord has done and how He's been faithful to carry us through the times where there's been trials and there's been storms. So I would say, the one piece of encouragement for them is, look back at your journey throughout your career, and see where the Lord's been faithful and illuminate that for others that are coming behind you.
yeah. So what I'm hearing is, first of all, we need to get a clear picture of biblical stewardship. So if God's called you to the profession of being a Christian educator, you need to receive that call in everything that it means. So
Yep.
if I'm not saying that, the Christian educator equates to the person who's getting less than, but whatever God gives you, if you think that a Christian educator is the one who gets five, I can see that. You're dealing with these precious lives, these precious souls. I mean, that's a high calling according to James 3, or whether it's the two or the one, the responsibility is to understand that we are in those classrooms or walk in those halls. We are God's conduit to bring that the transformative message to Jesus Christ to those kids. So I would say that's one that I'm hearing. The next thing is we need to get clear on what our goals are. And you said
Yep.
our what the yes is, and that serves as a blueprint for decision making to make sure that there's alignment from a goal standpoint. And then there's also important to understand where we are in the journey. So you mentioned the 2 to 5. I love the half marathon. I love
Yeah.
that. Halfway through the journey, and those who are kind of reaching the end. I really love that advice. We also talked about we talked a lot about a retirement, and I wanted to kind of pivot to kind of a biblical view of retirement because I've heard many people say, well, retirement's not in the Bible. Well, then what? If
Yeah.
retirement's not in the Bible, and I think those who really understand this from a biblical standpoint, yeah, it's not in the Bible. The Bible doesn't talk about the concept of retirement. It's, from what I understand, it's a relatively new concept, when you look at the totality of history. But there does seem to be a need for some preparation at the very beginning of a person's career for when they're no longer going to be teaching at the same level or the same capacity. So
Yes.
what, if not retirement, then what is the biblical view of, preparing long term? Uh, what is that called?
Yeah, it's a great question. Like you said, retirement's not a biblical concept. We don't see, and then Moses retired, but we do see transitional leadership throughout the Bible. We see people, God wanting to call people into leadership, and being able to prepare well, I think means being able to successfully pass the baton to that next generation, in this case of teachers. We see in the church that the pastor that stays well into his 70s or 80s, who now begins to have life challenges, is faced with a situation where, hey, I don't have anything to retire on. This wasn't something that we thought to do. Matter of fact, pastors in the 60s and 70s were encouraged to even opt out of Social Security. They would say, well, things like, well, it's not going to be there, or that's a government program. And so Bible colleges were encouraging students to get out of Social Security. And now we're finding out that because of Medicare and Medicaid benefits, that maybe was a mistake. And so this idea of transitional leadership also means, hey, we were not meant to, just teach, 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 and then die. The Lord's going to call us into a different season of ministry. He's going to give us different opportunities where we can share our skills and our experience in the classroom with others. And we see that when people retire, their lives become very, very small. And the number one reason is because their finances dictate what they can do and what they can't do.
Interesting.
And what we believe at Servant Solutions is that no, the Lord's going to call you into a different season of ministry. It may be a different expression, but imagine you being able to be a mentor for 4 or 5 or 8 younger teachers. Imagine if you could be a volunteer. Imagine if you could continue to use those skills and those abilities that the Lord has blessed you with in maybe a different way. It's not in the classroom anymore, but the Lord still wants to give you an opportunity to be able to be on mission for Him in a different way. And so I think that that's just part of the preparation that we have to do. I was reminded the other day when I was talking with somebody in a meeting. They said, well, it just seems so far away. And I said, well, when you're training for a marathon, you don't just get up and start to run 26 miles. It starts with a walk around the block, right?
Right.
It's this idea of we're going to do a little bit each day in order to be able to prepare and train. And that's that whole idea of retirement, being able to honor the Lord with the tithe, honor the Lord, but then also tithe to yourself, tithe to your future, tithe to what the Lord wants to do, and making sure that you are preparing even a little bit. Compounding interest is the eighth wonder of the world. And I always hear people say, well, I'm going to retire. Is it too late for me? I'm retired. And I tell them this. I say, unless you're going to retire tomorrow, it's not too late to put some plans in place. And that's the blessing that we get of being able to help folks to be able to do that.
I really appreciate that. And it almost seems that, even a part of, I would say, schools have professional development plans.
Hmm.
Um, and, a lot of the professional development plans school-wide, they focus on, biblical worldview, integration, so things that related to curriculum, dealing with parents, technology, depending
Yep.
on the school system, HR stuff. HR usually has some type of benefit enrollment. But the thought that just popped in my head when you mentioned that is really schools really being intentional about providing that type of training that they may not get somewhere else. You would think that the assumption is, oh yeah, they're getting that in church. That's not always the case. They're not always getting that type of sound biblical stewardship financial advice in churches. And so, I'm just popped in my head, if you talked about compounding interest, just kind of go with me here for a second. If
Sure.
a school were to design a professional development module focused on, let's say, biblical financial stewardship. So this is over and above how much you get paid, the benefits that we're offering at the school, but more along the lines of how to take care of your money. What might that look like from your perspective?
Yeah, so I think that it would have a different context for different people.
Mm,
I for one, over the course of the first maybe 15, 20 years of my adult life, really struggled with debt. And this idea of wanting to buy something on credit, not realizing what's going to be the cost of that.
yeah.
We see inflation happening, and so I think it's carefully having a it kind of goes back to defining your yes, but it goes back to having a plan, putting a budget in place
Mm,
to be able to know kind of where your money's going. I often felt like I wasn't in control of my money. My money was in control of me, and that's a very bad place to be. At least it was in my own life.
mm,
And it wasn't until I was able to get a hold of that and realize that that is something that was choking, the life out of me and so many other areas, my relationships, my faith, that really was a freeing, it was a game-changing moment.
yeah.
So I don't know if that completely answers your question, but for at least for me in my own life, debt was something. There's been a lot of studies that have been done over the course of the last 2 years. I just reviewed some findings that even in Christians, the number one cause for concern was the amount of debt. How am I going to get out of debt? How do I stay out of debt? And that is something that Christians are not immune to that.
Mm.
We see all too often that's a big thing that even Christians struggle with.
Yeah, because the interest works in reverse. It works against you, and it's
Yep.
pulling in the other direction. So, you're paying, if it's a credit card, you're paying upwards of 29, whatever the APR usually is on a credit card, 29% on $1,000, and
Yep.
that is compounding.
Yes.
It's rather than going the other way, working in your advantage. But yeah, that definitely does help, and I appreciate what you said about the debt, because I can see that as, in addition to not really preparing at the beginning of your career, or just preparing for this transitional period that the Lord is going to bring into your life. Um, it 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 makes it difficult to be able to follow the leading of the Holy Spirit wherever He might be calling you at that particular point in time. And so I really, really appreciate just I'm hearing this framework again that's kind of developing again, related to clear on biblical stewardship, clear on your yes, understanding compound interest, and not
Yep.
allowing debt, to
Yep.
inhibit you, and then also realizing that, yeah, hey, there's going to be a time where God's going to call you into a different season, how do you start preparing for that different season? And again, if God's called you to be a teacher, you may not be teaching in the same capacity, but could you transition to something where you're doing more discipling of the adults,
Yeah,
and I believe that's more biblical than anything. The
sure.
older, the gray hairs, I should say, teaching, the young folks that are coming up. Mark, can you give, I would say, about three practical steps, and I know you alluded to it at the beginning when you were talking about the different areas. But are there three pieces of advice, or one piece of advice that you would give to our Christian educators, in this paradigm? As I said at the beginning, this is the greatest calling, but it's hard. What piece of advice would you give them?
Yeah. So I would say this, and just quickly, there's one other thing you and I talked about, and this is the similarities between being a pastor of a church
Yes.
and being a teacher in a classroom. A pastor at a church has his congregation, and teachers have the kids in their classroom. I just was kind of doing some quick work on how many hours the teachers spend with the kids versus how many hours they're at home versus how many hours they might be at church.
Mm,
And in a lot of ways, the Christian educator has a greater influence just due to the amount of time that they have in their kids, with their kids in the classroom. And so it is a high calling, and it's something that you need to uh, make sure that you're taking care of your own spiritual walk. Make sure you're plugged in with a local church, a good Bible believing local church. Also, be in community with other people that can help support you when times are hard, when difficulties happen. Uh, Teachers know more about what's going on in their students' lives because they can see it in their eyes. They don't have to go to the home. They don't have to go to see the parents. They can see it in the kids. And that is a responsibility and a burden I think that all teachers carry. But those that are in the Christian classroom that have been called to minister, that have been called to shepherd and also to teach, you also are having a number of other responsibilities and things that you see. And it's heartbreaking when you have a family that's really struggling. Maybe they're going through divorce. Maybe one of the parents has passed away, or there's a relocation situation that just happened. You've got an opportunity to make a real impact on those students' lives. And that is a very difficult and it's a taxing place to be, very much like a pastor in a classroom, a pastor of a church. So I would say, this idea of faith, family, finances, and the Lord, number one, your relationship and walk with the Lord has got to be the most important thing. Then I would say that's probably your family, your spouse, and your family. And then, the rest of that would fall into place. But when we prioritize that and we make sure that our relationship with the Lord is first and foremost, that He's the most important, then all of these other things can be added. But I would say for teachers that are out there that they've not begun to prepare for this or even an idea of this, the number one blessing that the schools I think could have is find a local resource, find a local organization that can help put something in place that teachers can plug into, and not feel like they have to, be investing hundreds of dollars every month. Because let's face it, they don't have it. But they need to be able to have something to be where they can begin putting in place some resources to be able to prepare, for that time and eventually, when they do retire.
yeah, and what I really appreciate is this whole idea of you know, if this is what God's called you to do, let's step into it the right way. We don't have to look to the left or look to the right. Let's really trust the Lord by
Yeah.
prioritizing the things that the Lord would definitely want us to prioritize. And I want to echo what you said. I just want to encourage our teachers out there. It may look like there's a whole lot more demand than there's ever has been. It may seem like the parents may feel like it may feel like the parents are more demanding. Your school leaders are more demanding. The students are more demanding. But God has overcome all of that. And I
Amen.
just want to encourage all of our teachers, just if God has called you to this profession of teaching, keep your eyes fixed on Jesus. So just in the same way that Jesus Christ endured the scorn and the shame of the cross, whatever pressures that may come with you being a Christian educator, hey, endure it for the sake of Jesus Christ, thinking about what he endured for us. So teachers, leaders, you can do it. Faith, family, finances, prepare, prepare, prepare. Mark Senseman, Director of Business Development at Servant Solutions, thank you so much for your time and for your wisdom. Hey, where can everyone get in touch with you if they want to follow up with you and ask you some questions?
Yeah, so that you can find me on LinkedIn. My profile is available to see there, but I'll just share my organization, Servant Solutions. We're based in Anderson, Indiana. I could give you my email and my cell phone. It's just msensman@servantsolutions.org. And then my phone number I'll leave, and then you can drop that in the information. But check out our website. We have a free resource there for any Christian individual that's wanting resources. We have all kinds of different financial calculators. There's all kinds of videos. We have a great series called Video Through the Decades. What should I be doing in my 20s? What should be important to me now? What about if I'm in my 30s? What should I be doing? What should I be focused on? So it's this idea of each decade, what should I be doing to prepare for retirement, and what should I be focused on to make sure that I'm employing all of the tools, all of the resources that are available to be a good biblical steward of what God's called me to do. So check out our website, servantsolutions.org. There's a full resource of just all kinds of wonderful encouragement pieces, but also a lot of additional resources that your folks could check out as well. And we'd love to chat. We'd love to get to know you and help you along the journey.
Awesome. I know there's one word or maybe three words that Christian educators love: free, free, free.
Yeah. Yep.
So thanks again, Mark. Really appreciate you and looking forward to doing this again.
Yep. Thanks so much, Jerry. Appreciate it. God bless.
Grafted Together is a presentation of the Association of Christian Schools International. Learn more about biblical worldview and spiritual formation at acsi.org/graftedtogether.